Pelican Bay State Prison sits in a remote corner of Northern California, near the Oregon border, surrounded by dense forest and cold coastal air. It is designed to be isolated by geography before any physical barrier appears. The facility opens in 1989, built during an era when California expands its prison system rapidly. The goal is control. The mission is containment. Pelican Bay is not meant to rehabilitate. It is meant to separate. It houses people the state classifies as the most dangerous, most disruptive, or most influential within the prison system. From its beginning, Pelican Bay operates differently. It relies less on visible force and more on absence. Absence of movement. Absence of contact. Absence of time markers that define normal life. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing, because what happens next reveals how this system truly works. The heart of Pelican Bay is the Security Housing Unit, known as the SHU. It is a prison inside a prison. The SHU is designed for long-term solitary confinement. Inmates live alone in concrete cells measuring roughly 8 by 10 feet. The cell contains a concrete bed, a toilet, a sink, and little else. There are no windows to the outside world. Light comes from artificial sources. Sound travels through vents and steel doors. Human contact is minimal. Movement is tightly controlled. Meals pass through slots. Recreation takes place alone in small, enclosed yards sometimes described as concrete pens. In the SHU, isolation is not a temporary measure. It is indefinite. Many inmates remain there for years. Some remain for decades. Placement is often based not on recent violent acts, but on alleged gang affiliation. Validation as a gang member can occur through confidential informants, possession of certain artwork, reading materials, or association histories. Once validated, release from the SHU is rare. For years, there is no clear timeline. There is no fixed sentence length. There is no predictable exit. Time loses structure. Days repeat without markers. The system operates continuously, without pause. Pelican Bay becomes known not for constant physical violence, but for psychological damage. Studies and court records document widespread mental health deterioration among inmates held in long-term isolation. Symptoms include anxiety, depression, hallucinations, paranoia, and cognitive impairment. Some inmates struggle to speak coherently after years without conversation. Others lose the ability to tolerate light or noise. Suicide attempts occur. Self-harm is reported. These outcomes are not hidden. They are recorded in grievances, medical files, and legal filings. Correctional officials argue that the SHU is necessary. They state it prevents gang leaders from ordering violence. They claim isolation protects both staff and inmates. Pelican Bay is presented as a management solution. Control is the priority. But control comes at a cost. Inmates remain locked down for 22 to 24 hours a day. Visits are rare and occur through thick glass. Phone calls are limited or non-existent. Family ties weaken. Social skills erode. The environment remains static, but the human mind does not. Gang influence does not disappear inside Pelican Bay. Instead, it adapts. Communication continues through coded messages, indirect contact, and legal mail. Control shifts inward. Authority becomes psychological rather than physical. Intelligence gathered by prison officials acknowledges this reality. Isolation does not eliminate networks. It hardens them. It reinforces identity through deprivation. In some cases, it strengthens allegiance rather than dissolving it. Pelican Bay draws national attention in the early 2010s. Inmates across California prisons begin coordinated hunger strikes. The movement originates inside Pelican Bay's SHU. Participants protest indefinite solitary confinement and the lack of meaningful review. They demand basic reforms, including limits on isolation and clearer paths to release. The strikes spread statewide. Thousands participate. Some refuse food for weeks. Medical monitoring becomes necessary. The issue reaches public awareness. The hunger strikes do not rely on dramatic messaging. They rely on consistency. Statements are released outlining specific grievances. The demands focus on policy, not emotion. They call for changes to gang validation criteria, an end to group punishment, and compliance with international standards on solitary confinement. Media coverage increases. Lawmakers respond. Civil rights organizations file lawsuits. The system faces scrutiny it has not encountered before. Legal challenges expose internal practices. Court rulings find that prolonged solitary confinement without meaningful review violates constitutional protections. Judges note the psychological harm. Settlements require reforms. California agrees to modify its use of the SHU. Indefinite isolation is curtailed. New programs are introduced to allow inmates to earn release from solitary confinement through step-down processes. Thousands are transferred out of the SHU statewide. Pelican Bay's population changes. These reforms do not erase the past. Records remain. Testimony stands. The effects of long-term isolation persist long after policies change. Former SHU inmates describe difficulty reintegrating into general population units. Some struggle with basic social interaction. Others experience lasting mental health effects. The system shifts, but the damage does not reverse quickly. Time in isolation cannot be returned. Pelican Bay remains operational. Its purpose evolves, but its reputation endures. The prison becomes a symbol of an era when isolation is seen as a primary tool of control. It reflects broader trends in American incarceration during the late 20th century. Tough-on-crime policies dominate. Prison populations grow. Facilities expand. Solutions prioritize security over rehabilitation. Pelican Bay fits this model precisely. The design of the prison reinforces its philosophy. Architecture minimizes visibility. Corridors are long and enclosed. Movement is segmented. Every aspect is calculated to reduce unpredictability. The environment removes stimuli. There are no programs in the SHU. No group activities. No shared meals. The absence becomes routine. For staff, this is procedure. For inmates, it is existence. Critics argue that Pelican Bay demonstrates the limits of isolation as a control strategy. They point to evidence that extreme deprivation destabilizes rather than corrects behavior. They cite international standards that define prolonged solitary confinement as harmful. The United Nations identifies extended isolation as a form of cruel treatment. These conclusions align with findings from psychologists and correctional experts. Supporters of the SHU system maintain that some inmates cannot be safely housed elsewhere. They emphasize incidents of violence prevented by separation. They argue that reforms must balance safety and rights. The debate continues. Pelican Bay sits at the center of it. The prison does not operate in secrecy anymore, but its daily reality remains largely unseen by the public. The story of Pelican Bay is not defined by riots or mass casualties. It is defined by duration, by repetition, by years spent in silence. The harm occurs slowly. It accumulates. It does not require visible bloodshed. It requires time. This makes it harder to document and easier to ignore. Yet the records exist. Court transcripts, medical evaluations, internal reviews. They describe the same outcome through different language. California's prison system adjusts its policies, but Pelican Bay's legacy shapes future decisions nationwide. Other states examine their own use of solitary confinement. Some reduce it. Others maintain it with modifications. The conversation changes. Isolation becomes a subject of public debate rather than administrative routine. Pelican Bay plays a role in that shift. The facility continues to function under tighter oversight. Mental health evaluations become more frequent. Review processes are formalized. Exit pathways are clearer. These changes acknowledge that the previous system caused harm. They do not deny it. They respond to it. The acknowledgement itself marks a significant shift in correctional philosophy. Pelican Bay represents a boundary. It shows how far a system can go when control becomes the sole objective. It illustrates what happens when human needs are treated as variables rather than constants. The prison does not rely on chaos. It relies on order. That order produces consequences that unfold quietly and persistently. The inmates who pass through Pelican Bay are not defined solely by their crimes. They are shaped by the conditions they endure. The institution leaves marks that are not always visible. When people emerge after years of isolation, they carry the effects with them. Reintegration becomes complex. The system must manage outcomes it helped create. Pelican Bay is often described as a place where violence is contained. That description is incomplete. Violence does not always require physical force. It can exist in structure, in policy, in the removal of human contact. The prison's history demonstrates that control achieved through deprivation has lasting costs. Today, Pelican Bay stands as a case study. It is cited in legal arguments, academic research, and policy discussions. It influences how solitary confinement is understood in the United States. Its existence forces a question that remains unresolved. How much isolation is acceptable in the name of security? The answer continues to evolve. The prison does not close. It does not disappear. It adapts. Its walls remain. Its cells remain. The SHU still exists, though changed. The lessons remain embedded in its concrete. They do not fade quickly. Pelican Bay is not an anomaly. It is a product of choices made over decades. Those choices prioritize control, efficiency, and risk management. The consequences emerge slowly. They require patience to observe and honesty to acknowledge. The prison reveals what happens when systems push human endurance to its limits. The story of Pelican Bay is not loud. It does not rely on spectacle. It unfolds through policy documents, court rulings, and lived experience. It shows how harm can be institutional, gradual, and normalized. That is what gives it weight. The prison remains a reminder that incarceration is not only about walls and locks. It is about time. About isolation. About what happens when people are removed not just from society, but from human connection itself.